Welcome to an Acres of Reed video. Today we are going to talk about the care and upkeep of your sourdough starter. So let's take a look. This is our sourdough starter. We've actually had this active sourdough starter going for about 6 months now. I'd like you to see what it looks like first thing in the morning after it's had about 24 hours since its last feeding. You can see right here, this is where it had risen. After its feeding, it ate and it bubbled and it bubbled and it bubbled and it bubbled. So you can see it about doubled in size. It is still active. You can see all of the bubbles that are still in there. It's just a lot less active than it was yesterday afternoon and evening. And that's a good thing, because right now all the yeast in there are hungry and they're ready to eat. So when you put together whatever bread product you're going to make, whether it's French bread, sandwich bread, cinnamon rolls, English muffins, or just pancakes like we're going to make this morning, it will be ready to become active, and it's going to start feeding right away on whatever starch and sugar that you have in that product. So this is really the ideal time to cook with it. Right here is what I want you to see. The texture. It's looser after its 24-hour mark. It's definitely looser, but it is still thick. So hopefully you can get a sense of how thick it is. And we'll show it later after it's fed and you can see. It is definitely still thick, but it's a little on the flat side. It's a little squished, a little condensed, not quite so foamy. So this is what it looks like when it's ready to be fed. So we're going to go ahead and scoop out a couple of cups, make our pancakes, and we'll come back after that to show you how we feed it. Welcome back. Pancakes were delicious. Here I have everything set up to feed the starter. And it's really quick and it is painless, but you do have to do a wee bit of math. Here's our starter, 24 hours after its last feed, and with 2 cups removed for our double batch of sourdough pancakes. It's looking pretty low. It's not too bad. You can actually increase or decrease your starter pretty easily. It's very forgiving. If you use it down and you get it really low, oh, there's only 2 cups left, that's okay. Feed it. Now you know, I'm not going to use it tomorrow. It'll double to about here. I'm not going to use it tomorrow. I've got plenty of bread. Okay, and the next morning, just feed it, even though you haven't used it. It's going to double again. Then you realize, whoa, I've committed to do a double batch of bread for something, or my family's coming over and I really want to get an extra set in there. Well, that night, feed it again. If you give it an extra feeding, it will just double again. Every time you feed it, it essentially doubles. So as you work with it, you'll figure out what works best for you, and eventually you'll settle into an amount that your family comfortably uses. Now, be careful. If you don't use it and you feed it, you will quickly be able to have enough starter to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And that's a lot of Tupperware. So be careful. Try to keep it within what you need. It's wasteful to just feed it every day and feed it every day and have it grow and not do anything with it. If you're not going to use it for an extended period of time, put it in the refrigerator. And I have one that I've set aside in the refrigerator this last week, which I'll show you in another section. For now, we're just looking at the countertop always active starters. If it gets too low and you need it, just use it again. You can actually feed it every 8 to 12 hours to grow it the size you need. Just remember, it's going to react a little different, and it's going to cook a little different than if you had done a standard feed in the morning, use it later. Also, different times of year will require different amounts of feeding. Think about it. Yeast requires a nice warm location to rise. You put your bread in the oven and you have the light on. You put it in a proof box and it's a certain temperature. That's because it needs that temperature threshold to really be active and thrive and go through all of its processes. Well, now let's think about summer. Unless you have your starter near an air conditioner, it's going to be at that perfect warm weather, warm temperature to rise, to be extremely active. So actually, we're in October now, so I'm feeding it once a day, but in the full summer, I was feeding it every 12 hours because it looked like this 10 to 12 hours after feeding. It very quickly doubled in an hour and then fell back down again a few hours after that. So I was feeding it twice a day to really maintain the activity level. And yes, that meant we baked about twice as much as we normally would have. But that's fine. Neighbors got some bread. We got to do some experiments and try some things with it and see how it turned out. So whatever works for you. If you're not going to use it that much of it, or you only really want to bake with it every couple of days or once a week, pop it in the fridge. It's no problem. The yeast is actually very, very resilient. Now what we're going to do here is go ahead and weigh it. I know that this container is 180 grams. And here's our scale, handy dandy digital scale. I really, really love this kitchen scale. I weigh all sorts of things, mostly for baking, but we also weigh other things as we're looking for serving sizes or just trying to figure out, hey, I only need half a pound of noodles. Instead of eyeballing it, I can actually weigh it, which is really, really nice. Ours, and most of them will, have a conversion for grams or pounds. You're going to want grams. As I said, our container weighs 180 grams. Grams are a much smaller scale, a much more sensitive number, and you'll be much more accurate in how you do it. And yes, if at all possible, you want to weigh your ingredients. You need to consider water weighs more than flour. And you put in the same amount by weight of water and flour. So if you are measuring it and you just do a cup of each, well, you've actually added more water by weight than flour. And you're going to end up with a very runny, loose starter. And some people work with runny, loose starters. Some people work with starters thicker than I prefer. This is just kind of a middle ground that I really find works best for my purposes. As you can see, we are using unbleached flour, and we are using, well, this was originally a spring water. Once I use this gallon of spring water, all I've done is refill it from the tap. We happen to have good water here. And you still want to try to avoid any chlorine. So if you fill it from the tap, leave the lid off and let it sit a full 24 hours. That actually lets the chlorine dissipate, escape, and gives you a chlorine-free tap water. 24 hours later, measure it, use it, put your lid back on. When we were using it over the summer, I actually had 2 gallons, so one could sit the full 24 hours while I used the other one for the morning and night feeds until we were good. So here we are. We have our scale. I'm going to put the starter on the scale in its container. Convert it to grams and put it on. Alright, we have about 1,150 grams. Because I know this is a 180 gram container, what I can do is subtract 180 grams so that we've just got the weight of the starter. So to make that easy, I'm going to take off 200 and then add 20. So this would be 946. Rounded to 950, it's pretty close. So 950 would be minus the 200, and we're going to go ahead and add 20. So that's going to be 970 grams total of starter. Now, to feed the starter, I'm going to do half water by weight and half flour of the total amount. So I'm going to take 970 and divide it in half, which is going to be 460. Clear out my new one. So I've zeroed out a bowl, and now I'm going to look for about 460 grams of both water and flour. Now if you are brave at heart, you can clear it out with this on the scale, and you can weigh it. I'm sorry, I'm being corrected. It's 485. Someone got a calculator for me, thank you. It's 485 grams for half of it. So what I'm looking for is 485 grams. So what we're going to do is just measure it. If you are brave, you can measure it directly in there, but you've got to be real slow and real careful. So let's see, 300. If you measure it here and you get a little extra, it's easy to put back without having your starter get mixed in. So we're at 400, 486. Since I'm looking for 485, I'm okay with 1 gram over. So here we go. This is our measured amount of flour to feed for the day, and I'm literally going to just pour it in. Now obviously I'm going to measure the flour first, because once I measure the water I'm going to have a big wet bowl, and that is going to be more difficult to get out my flour. Not trying to make mud, trying to feed the dough. So here we go. Again, it's back to 0, and you want to go a lot slower with the water, because as I said, it weighs more than the flour. And you're looking for the same thing, 485 grams. Getting close, slowing down. 484, pretty good. So there is our water, and we are going to just do the same thing. Add it, the whole thing. Now at this point, it's kind of a big gloppy mess. So we're going to take our spoon. Oh, something I want to point out. Notice it's plastic. You want to work with plastic or wood if you're working with your starter. Now once you're ready to cook with it and you put it in your metal pan, that's fine. You put it in your metal mixer bowl to stir it up, that's fine. But metal will kill yeast, so you don't want to store it and you don't want to stick metal inside there in metal. So you want to really keep it to plastic and wood. So now I've got my big long stirring spoon stuck in there, and you just give it a good mix. It is going to look really lumpy, and you could stand here and stir it for an hour and it's still going to look really lumpy. But if you just get it mostly stirred in, not worried about chunks, it's going to be chunky. You will be amazed, because the yeast is going to eat all of that, and it's going to become very smooth and airy and foamy as it processes. So this is all we are, go ahead and hold that for me. This is all we are looking at, just getting a basic mix. It's okay if you get a little up on the side. Try to scrape that down at the end of your day or so, because remember, it's going to rise all the way up to here. But you don't want to get it way up the side, or it's going to start to get dry and chunky. So try to keep it down low, give it a good stir, and that's it. Well, actually, just like we did with the measuring cup, we'll actually just use clean fingers and wipe off the excess. Get as much of it off as we can. It's very sticky. And then rinse when we are done. So your sourdough starter has been fed.